welcome to the UC Big News Show for October. I'm Kieran Devlin, and today we've got a packed episode featuring an all-star panel as ever. We have Craig Durr, Brue, Irwin Lazar, and Zeus Kerravala. Welcome, everyone. And since our last episode, the collaboration UC and AI landscape has been buzzing with activity, from Cisco's bold moves at WebexOne to Microsoft's strategic AI partnerships. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's dive in. And let's kick off with WebexOne 2025. Indeed, we had several major announcements, including the introduction of AI Canvas, but also major advancements in Cisco's contact center solutions, which emphasize AI-powered quality management and agent assistance. These developments really are signaling Cisco's intent to position itself as an AI leader, similarly to many of its competitors. Zeus, what were your thoughts on Cisco's WebexOne this year?
Yeah, I think, first of all, everybody says they're an AI leader, but I think, from a Cisco perspective, I think this year's WebexOne, well, you're right, there was a lot of interesting announcements, right? They had a bunch of new agents, that they rolled out, Task Agent, Note Taker. They had a new operating system for its devices that brought in some interesting new capabilities to the devices like audio zones and note takers. I think the more interesting aspect of WebexOne, though, was it looks like Cisco has finally got its platform story together, right? And so historically, and Jeetu Patel, the chief product officer, will say this, that historically Cisco has been a kind of a holding company. They had good network products, they had good cloud products, they had good security products, but everything was kind of hodgepodge together, and there was no real advantage for running Cisco on Cisco, and they're trying to build that. And so if you look at, you take a very basic example like their device endpoints, those have, Cisco Thousand Eyes, which is their observability product, those agents built onto it. There's a lot of telemetry that comes off those, and then you can infer a lot of kind of workspacey things, right? And so they're trying to position the device as a critical part of office infrastructure, like you would think that Wi-Fi is, right? So, but a lot of that comes from their networking and security capabilities that they've been on there. You mentioned AI Canvas. So AI Canvas actually was announced last June at Cisco Live. When they introduced that as a networking operational dashboard, and they call it AI Canvas because you ask it questions, and it over the canvas will actually dynamically build the interface. A little later on in the year, they announced integration with security, and now they've brought a Webex Control Hub on it. So the idea of the canvas is while Cisco has a lot of dashboards, and I've often joked that if there was a magic quadrant for single panes of glass, they'd be the runaway top right because they have so many single panes of glass, right? So now, in fairness to them, right, what a collaboration engineer works with is different than a network engineer, which is different than a security engineer. And so you can use those independent tools, but then if you want to get into multi-domain troubleshooting, AI Canvas comes into play there. And that, of course, is built off this one Cisco platform as well. And so I think they've where I've seen them really try and differentiate themselves is the Cisco on Cisco story. Back when I was a customer and reseller at Cisco, we sold an awful lot of Cisco VoIP because people just thought Cisco VoIP worked better on a Cisco network. Somewhere over the years, they lost that platform advantage, and now they're trying to get that back. And I think, to me, it's their best way to kind of regain their mojo and collaboration. They've got good products, but there's lots of good products out there, and they want to be able to leverage that Cisco network to be able to provide some value above and beyond what you might get from another collaboration vendor.
One of the great things that you are right about, especially that control panel. I would put it up there if I had a chart, but then I'm sure one of our peers would probably write a scathing review of my quadrant. Yeah. So, but I didn't say that, but and you're right. It's great from a go-to-market perspective, and how often would a network engineer want to cross-reference what maybe a collaboration engineer might take place? Maybe not so much.
It's like, hey, the call quality is bad. Why is that, right?
But there is where these things do kind of have some roll up. I mean, Cisco is starting to roll out this concept of the networked room. So they're really leaning into their core competency of being a networking oriented UC player in their WebEx story too. And things breaks down. That's where Thousand Eyes comes in really well. Things within the room, especially, they do a lot more AV over IP stuff. So I think it can be really interesting and helpful. I'm curious to see how these controls still align. So like you said, people can stay within their swim lanes of when they're trying to troubleshoot or activate or manage other elements.
I think one thing about this WebexOne was that how different it was from previous events in terms of, one, I think it was the best one yet, but also it wasn't really separate as like kind of what Zeus alluded to, which is like it actually came into the one Cisco story. It wasn't like, oh, WebEx is this totally different thing that sits over here. So they really wove together like the security, networking, infrastructure, data center, and collaboration all together into that connected intelligence story, which that's the best they've ever done at telling that story. And it was really clear. And then the other part about just kind of leading into this agentic era, I'm curious to see how some of the devices, and I know y'all want to talk a little bit about devices coming up, but how the devices and even the UIs might change, knowing that we are going to be working with agents and the way that we communicate with them is quite different than a human, even if it's natural language, how things might change there to have that sort of co-worker be an agent. But I thought it was a great event.
Yeah, and actually the quality management that you referred to, Kieran, I think the reason that was important was while everybody's got quality management and contact centers, this is the first one that I've seen that actually allows you to manage your virtual agents and your human agents together as one pool of resources, right? And I think that is going to have to become a standard part of of contact centers moving forward. But they're give them kudos; they were the first to roll that out. So.
And I'd echo what Melody said. I think that the one Cisco story came through pretty loud and clear, the integration of management. We see that resonating with customers when they're evaluating Cisco. One of the things that really attracts them with Cisco is it's not only a single platform for UC and CC, but the ability to manage devices and apps through the same management console that they're typically using to manage their Cisco networking infrastructure. I think one of the things that jumped out at me is that they're talking now about sharing AI information with Microsoft. So that was one of the things that was mentioned on stage: the ability to share information two ways with Copilot. I thought we talked about this earlier, that they still always struggle to kind of get out to be thought of as more than a hardware company. They make great hardware, but they always want to position themselves as making great software too. During the session they had with person from Microsoft who joined the stage, I think G2 asked him, what is it about Cisco that really excites you about the partnership? He goes, well, you guys make great hardware and we make great software. And, that just sort of, I don't know if that was the expected response, but it almost reinforced that idea that they're still predominantly a hardware company.
There was another great way that G2 positioned it as well too. He went down, and I'm not sure if that was just an analyst topic or I can't remember if it was on the main stage, but he talked about we want to be open and interoperable, or open and integrated. And as his statement, he was leaning into the idea. He made this example. He said, in the past, Cisco operated like a holding company. We had hundreds of acquisitions and people had their little fiefdom and they wanted to be a GM of that business and kind of manage it. And I think the one thing that we started seeing the outcome of him being a unified chief product officer and president across the board and aligning these things, that they're not little singular business units, but there's the opportunity to integrate these. And so there's not only that open and interoperable or integrated story with partners like Microsoft, but within the portfolio itself too, which I thought was insightful.
Yeah, when they also had Zoom show up there, right?
I know, yeah.
Well, look at that. Like where, it was a couple of years ago when they started to partner with Microsoft, everybody was like, oh, you've got Cisco and Microsoft on the same stage. But now it's like, they have to partner. And I think G2 is really smart to say, like, if somebody has, 30 something % of the market share and we have a chance to be a part of that, why would we not? It's like, why would you close people out and not offer that to your customers? So I think they're doing it the right way, and they're, in some ways they're putting ego aside to partner with competitors, and in some ways they're just advancing.
Yeah, well, it's smart. When G2 told me when he first started that people complained about Microsoft being such a strong headwind, and his response was, well, how do you make it a tailwind?
Terrific. Well, we'll move to our second segment of today, which is, Dreamforce happened a few weeks ago. It was, and then it's essential to this was this, I guess, a soft relaunch of Slack as this the agentic operating system, or the place that work gets done. And as part of this, there were some veiled digs at Microsoft. I wonder if the European Commission's finding a couple of months ago might have influenced some of that. Some of that feeling. But it was very interesting. There was an upgraded Slack bot. There was some native integration with Salesforce tools, including Agentforce Sales, IT and HR Service, and third-party platforms like Google Drive and Asana, and even Teams integration. So maybe the ill feeling wasn't that extensive. Irwin, how do you see the shift positioning Slack in the landscape? Is this just a rebrand, or is it something genuinely quite substantial?
I think it's a reaction to the market conditions. So we saw in research we published earlier this year that companies that operate multi-vendor environments from a collaboration standpoint were looking at, hey, we think we need to consolidate on a single vendor so that we can feed all of our data from our different applications into the AI agent, whether it's Copilot, Gemini, et cetera. And that led them typically to look at, Microsoft and Google as having these full end-to-end collaboration suites. Now what we're seeing is Slack saying, hey, wait a minute, we want to be able to pull information from a variety of different applications into Slack and allow you to have common search, to carry out actions, to build agents that touch different applications. And we've seen them do this, obviously with Salesforce since the acquisition, more recently with Box. I think it was about a year ago that they announced Box integration into Slack. And so now they're trying to build that Slack workspace as being a place where you can integrate and manage all of the different applications you have, interact with those applications, and not have to move around to different apps in order to get your work done. So it becomes, that almost workspace unified interface, or connected workspace, however you want to call it. So I think it makes sense from the direction they're heading. It allows them to hopefully exploit a difference with Microsoft and continue to show value for using Slack.
I don't think of it as a rebrand. Sorry, we have a little lag, so we keep talking at the same time. But I don't think of it as a rebrand at all. I think it's actually they're finally showing what Slack probably was meant to be, and AI and agentic AI is helping to fuel that along. But Slack, when they acquired Slack, it wasn't supposed to just be only a messaging platform, and it's slowly built up to this. And I feel like it's finally sort of like getting its day in the sun. And having been, on the product side of things, I was in Slack. I lived in Slack, and so when you see like the integrations into Jira and now CRM and everything else, this really makes a whole lot of sense for people who are already using Slack. It's also a huge opportunity for them to grow their business beyond just the Slack users, all the cross-selling, upselling. But I don't think of it as a rebrand as much of it is that like they're now seeing like could be really the primary catalyst for AI adoption. They are there in that what they call the front door of work, and there are full companies that run on Slack, and so for them to embed all of their CRM data and workflows into HR, IT, all of it into the Slack interface, then employees are going to do things that they actually don't want to do. It's not just like, they not don't want to do, but they don't do. How much data doesn't get entered into a service ticket or into a CRM because people don't do it. So if it's right there in front of them in their Slack interface, they're more likely to do it. So I think this is going to help them with AI adoption, and I think it's a good move for them.
Well, I think it can open the door to more people using Slack too. And like Slack's interesting because people that use Slack like Slack, but there are a lot of cryptic commands you have to know, right? And so by building an agentic interface, you can open the door to more people using it. I thought when Salesforce bought it, they might actually get rid of some of that stuff and try and make it a little more kind of business user friendly versus, developer, IT pro, things like that. And they really didn't, but I guess they didn't want to disrupt that base. But to me, if you really want to tie Slack to Salesforce and build this agentic interface, actually makes it usable by a lot more people. And maybe they do have an opportunity to take some, share back for the stuff they've lost. But to me, I'm not going to call it a Hail Mary. I think it's the right thing for them to do. But it certainly is probably the best way for them to try and establish a bigger base within the customers they have.
I actually wholeheartedly agree with you, Zeus. Once. That's the only time I'm going to do it. Okay. But no, I mean, so when I map out the UC players in the world, I think of Slack as being a chat centric player in this space. They don't have a strong video story. They don't have any kind of calling story. And like you said, it's very cryptic. How many people know how to talk with a backslash and pull up things? I mean, the other strength they had is they've always had strong plugins. I mean, so you would have a Zoom plugin in the last company I worked with, and we would backslash Zoom to launch a Zoom call to kind of offset it. So I think their integration of, like 2,600, whatever it is, strong core ideas is very powerful, but they really need to flip that bit to go from IT pro-centric, to use your term in the backslash language. If they can use more natural language, agentic, to kind of tie in those integrations. I agree once with you.
I'm going to start keeping a tally board beside my desk just every time it happens. Well, we'll move on to a company we've discussed tangentially with the previous two segments, which is, of course, the big one, Microsoft. And I think it has been quite interesting how it's diversifying its AI portfolio away from ChatGPT and OpenAI. Well, this week, as the time of recording, it announced it was integrating Anthropic's Claude AI assistant into its Microsoft 365 services, including Teams, Outlook, and Word. And it's powered by Anthropic's very notable MCP Mono Context Protocol, an open source standard for connecting AI to data sources. This move sort of signifies Microsoft's commitment to expanding its AI capabilities on the premise of providing users with more advanced tools for workplace productivity. Mel, how significant is this shift in Microsoft's AI strategy, and what does it mean for the market?
So I think the most important thing here is that this is really their multi-model strategy in action. So letting enterprises choose the best AI model for specific tasks rather than kind of taking this one size fits all approach. If you look at models, and the more you use different ones, you can kind of learn that each one sort of have different personalities, different strengths. And this is really answering to that different people, people have preference, but they also do have different strengths. So to be able to choose the model, and I think you'll see this just across so many different vendors that, you can choose your own model. But they also, along with this, they made some announcements like their Office agent, so the chat first document creation tool. So, I have yet to actually just be able to magically create a polished PowerPoint deck. I don't know about you guys. Maybe I'm just not prompting correctly, but the demos are a little different than reality for some people. And I think we've got a little ways to go on that. But, you can go beyond just that generation by asking clarifying questions, doing research. And so applying these different models gives different strengths where you need it in the place where you need it. So I think it's a good move. I think, in terms of what does it mean for the market? It's definitely hedging its OpenAI dependency. I think that's a super important part of this whole announcement. But it really is there's a big shift right now happening from the productivity workflows, like say, AI assisted editing or AI assisted catch me up or whatever, to AI first creation. So we'll see if this, helps with that to kind of create a little bit more with the MCP integration, create a little more interoperability across their whole AI ecosystem instead of just sort of this, walled garden. So I think it's a good move.
Yeah, well, I think it was inevitable, right? Just in the direction AI is going. As you mentioned, like all the models are different things. And I think a lot of people looked at Microsoft's dependence on AI as being something that eventually was going to hold them back. And so this does give them a lot of the customers a lot of choice and model. I think customers do have to go into this with eyes open, right? If you do want to be able to use it, because I was reading some of the fine print, and if with Mike, what they're saying is that, and this makes some sense, right? If you choose a different model other than OpenAI, you're outside the Microsoft guardrails, and so some of the security you thought you might have had, you might have to take care of yourself, right? And so there are a lot of kind of gotchas to that, but I do think it allows Microsoft down the road, because you never know who's gonna, like, every day it seems there's new model providers, and so you want to be able to use the best model for particular use cases. Some customers are going to have dependency for themselves, right? They're going to have their own preferences based on what industry they're in or whatever. And so now this creates a lot more flexibility, which is very un Microsoft, actually, to allow customers to have that kind of choice. So, but I do think it was inevitable that they headed down this path.
Sorry, we've got a lag. But if you look at the investments that Microsoft, Google, AWS are making into AI startups, they could just be like hedging and saying like, okay, but we're going to just sprinkle a little money here and there in case one of them wins. But you can see the future of a much more open ecosystem and being able to choose those different models for different scenarios. And I think the one other thing that's really important here that I didn't bring up yet is the voice and video integration with agentic AI is going to be huge. We've all talked about that, like, voice is back for a while, like at voice, everybody was, all the other channels and voice kind of came last. But with agentic AI, the voice and video integration is like the next frontier, I think. So while current implementations may focus like on the text-based chat and document access and meeting summaries, you're going to see that the voice to agent interactions during like Teams calls or Zoom meetings where the AI actually may eventually participates in the conversation, this has to be something that all UC vendors need to pay attention to.
I would just add in, I think, we are seeing the walls coming down a little bit around AI. And I think the word of the last 3 months has been MCP. Every vendor briefing I've been in has said, hey, we are launching an MCP server to open our AI up and to allow us to share information and take advantage of others as well. I was out at Oracle's AI World last week, former Cloud World, and OpenAI and the ability of Oracle to support any model you bring to the table was front and center in everything they talked about. So I think we're definitely seeing a trend away from the walled garden of AI toward more of an open environment.
Yeah, well, let's see if it works.
Yeah, and like I think Melody might have brought up, issues related to security and data sharing and so on become paramount as you're thinking about what am I sharing outside of my environment.
Yeah, I've always said if we can't get Slack and Teams to send messages to each other, I don't know. The agent-to-agent communication seems unlikely. So
I'm just glad that they're doing a better job of now on the end user front integrating Copilot chat across the productivity apps. That was one of the recent updates they had as well too. So at least on the front end, and the basics of this is the free chat is available as a solo AI tool within those interfaces. The look and feel, the user interface is the same. If you have the premium Copilot chat, it allows you then to kind of also share information across those productivity apps and even then query OneDrive data or other data you have as well too. So I felt like that was already out, the integration across the productivity apps, but it seems to be the ongoing confusion of how end users, everyday knowledge workers are utilizing AI within the Microsoft ecosystem. It's there. And like Melody said, I still can't say, create me a 4-slide deck that's based on this, but at least it seems to be getting closer to the idea that I can share information and maybe hopefully across, the files that I'm creating within Microsoft.
yeah, well, Canva's going to do that a lot faster than they are. So
Canva does it now, so yeah.
And Irwin alluded to Oracle earlier, and we will be talking a little bit about Oracle's cloud now, especially it feels especially timely the same week as the AWS outage. And that is Zoom and Oracle in the last couple of weeks have announced a strategic partnership to help businesses scale customer engagement. With this collaboration, Zoom's customer experience platform can now operate on Oracle's cloud infrastructure, expanding its reach to more organizations. Meanwhile, Oracle has also selected Zoom Contact Center to support its own global customer service operations, integrating with Oracle service workflows. Craig, what would you say are the key implications of this partnership for organizations looking to really enhance their customer engagement strategies and more broadly for the market?
Well, I think one of the key ideas here is there might have already been some Zoom Oracle working in the background, but now it's front and center, and it's making Zoom part of this Oracle go-to-market opportunity now. So Zoom is located in OCI, the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, which these days, after just coming off this AWS outage, is probably a good strategy to think about diversification of where you might be located in terms of some of your core work flows. But then it allows a closer integration into their CX offering there, and phone integrating with a very powerful back end. So I think what they're seeing to do is yes, there's some back end technology, but I think there's as much some go-to-market opportunity here to be leveraged from Oracle Marketplace to Zoom also talking about this in terms of its data resiliency being across, top tier clouds.
Yeah, I don't know why this is a surprise though, because it's not they were doing something in the background. In fact, I'm looking at an Oracle press release from 2020 where the headline is Zoom selects Oracle as a cloud infrastructure provider for its core online meeting service. The difference here is now it's actually doing the context piece, right? And phone, yeah. And but it's all the same platform anyways. So if it can, I would find it hard to believe that Zoom would separate meetings just to run that on Oracle, and kind of break up the platform. So I thought the more meaningful part of this was that Oracle was willing to run its contact center, in the 15,000 seats or so on Zoom Contact Center. They've only been in the market 4 years, and it takes a long time to get get legit in that market, right? And so for them to be able to do, 5-digit contact centers in that short a period of time, I think is pretty impressive. In fact, I think when I look out at the landscape, I think they're a really interesting dark horse vendor. People tend to like Zoom. They got good, customer satisfaction scores as somebody that could come in, kind of out of left field and go take a bunch of share. So
I think I think that only arising within the 4 years is actually one of the hidden strengths. They don't have this plaque build up of how typical CX companies have built out their workflows or functionality, how they might have bolted on some type of partnership or AI feature or what have you. It gives Zoom a chance to live true to its moniker of being an AI first platform in the fact that it's building it out. So it to me, it's as much a go-to-market opportunity and strategy as it is maybe a back-end technology.
Yeah, but I think to carry the point you brought up at the beginning, I think given the AWS outage, that's Zoom's main cloud provider, and it's always good to have a backup. And if you're, if you're a customer and you're looking at one of these smaller vendors, ask who they're running on and who the backup one is, because if they're solely dependent on one, and I'm not picking on AWS. Look, all these cloud providers have outages from time to time. So I was glad to see like the other cloud providers not throwing stones at them, because you don't know when it's your turn.
I heard a great definition. Someone asked, what is cloud? And it says cloud means it's just not running on your computer. It's running on someone else's computer.
I think Zoom would appreciate you describing them as not having much plaque. So that was cool. That was a really great.
Yeah, that sounds like a marketing slogan.
Well, no, it is interesting. It's because I'm here at the NICE event, and I was at the AWS before that. And it's what's fascinating is that when I bring up the fact that a lot of the AI that we're seeing is going to disrupt traditional buying patterns, right? In fact, I was talking to Cognigy about this. Most of their sales actually go through CIO or Chief Digital Officer, where most of NICE's sales go through the traditional contact center manager. NICE is a little more careful about their messaging of job replacement and staff augmentation and stuff, because they don't want to upset that customer. These new entrants don't have an install base to lose, and they can be a lot more aggressive with their messaging and who they target in those companies and stuff. And so, I think in some ways, when you're the new kid on the block, you don't have to worry about, upsetting your legacy apple cart, because it's all upside for you.
Graham. Well, on the AWS outage, I think we'll have to have a separate emergency chat about that, just because I really want to garner everyone's favorite obscure like deficiencies where it fell down. Mine was the smart bed. I don't know if you've seen the smart bed that automatically folds. So people couldn't get to sleep, which was a particularly good one.
Got a bunch of cranky Brits because they couldn't.
More cranky than normal? I mean, it's already gray and cloudy yet. What else do they need to be excited about?
Bed, apparently. Fantastic. Well, one final section before we go, and it is, I guess, a quick round robin because there has been such a busy month that we haven't had time to discuss some exciting news about collaboration and meeting devices. So I'm going to throw to Craig and then Irwin for that quick fire round of some momentous announcements, including with Neat.
Okay, so I'll start with that Neat one, which just came out. Neat launched a small form factor board called the Neat Board 32. We had a chance to see it in preview when we were in San Jose, and they announced it at GITEX. Well, first of all, it was really interesting to announce a device at something like GITEX, a UC platform. It's a really interesting device. True to Neat's DNA, they spent a lot of time focusing on the design, everything from the box to the recycled materials to the hinges on the back. And then, of course, the camera and audio functionality, the microphones is really good. It's an interesting play because they're leaning into a market that I follow. I call them personal appliances. That is, it's steady, but it's kind of lumpy. These either go on desk and are kind of a purpose-built device that someone uses as a second monitor, or in today's hybrid work office environments, it goes into shared spaces, those phone booths, those huddle spaces, and things like that. So it's good that they're completing their portfolio. It's a very elegant device. I really like it a lot. It's interesting to see what the volume is going to be going forward on it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's nice to see people again paying attention to, I know this is designed more for small spaces, but it's also a really awesome personal device. It seems like the personal device space has sort of been left behind in the last couple of years as everybody's focused on the room side. And, other than the last real innovation I think we saw was the Poly P series P15, which I'm using now, and P5 and so on, which were designed to, provide things like noise cancellation and high quality camera experiences for home and personal users. So, again, I think that this device is certainly well suited for a small meeting space, but with a 32-inch monitor, I think it's going to be really useful for individual workspaces as well.
Which one do you want to do next?
Yeah, so the second one, also Neat, was the introduction of something called Neat Open. And the idea behind Neat Open is that, today if you go into a BYOD space, there might be a cable sitting on the table, there might be a touchpad for turning the lights on and off, but there's no real UI equivalent for BYOD that we see, say, for a Microsoft Teams room, a Zoom room, a WebEx room, and they're trying to solve that by creating an app that lives on a touchpad within that BYOD space, that when you plug your laptop in, yes, you can use your personal device to control the meeting, but you also have access to things like AI note taker, AI capabilities for improving the experience, bringing additional applications like whiteboard and content and browser and so on into the room. So it's almost designed to give you that same one-touch join experience that you have in a dedicated room in the BYOD space. And I think that's innovative, and it's not something I've seen from other vendors.
I think so too. Another one that actually goes back to WebEx that came out is WebEx. Cisco announced its partnership as being an MDEP platform. Now, in terms of the device world, I was just sitting with a bunch of customers at a customer council, and they're still kind of like hands in the air. What does it mean to them? But it does start unifying a security and management story on the Microsoft backend. What's really interesting about that is not that long prior, right about the time they talked about Open, Neat also announced that they were migrating their Android platform to an MDEP. So in market, that only leads maybe two large volume players, Logitech and HP, that haven't yet signed up for the MDEP program. So it's an interesting space to watch that. My thoughts right now, someone like HP is leaning on existing devices that have grandfathered certification. But as soon as they start looking to refresh their portfolio, they're going to have to start addressing, which is going to be a upfront Microsoft requirement of participating in this MDEP program.
Craig, doesn't it seem like in that world, especially now that Cisco builds such good high-end devices, right? Logi does low-end and supply chain better than anybody. Neat's got their devices. That HP Poly kind of getting squeezed out here. I mean, They've not really been all that fast of late, and it just seems I don't know what their kind of sweet spot is anymore. Right?
Well, I mean, that could be an entire episode, but this is what I think. They have the portfolio covered. If you think about having a Windows-based portfolio, small, medium, large, and appliance-based, small, medium, large as well too. They lean towards enterprises. I guess they kind of had the aura at one point in time of like, you don't get fired by buying IBM. Well, the problem is they're not being really helpful to the channel right now. And channel is having a hard time being incentivized, I think, to promote HP over some other vendors as well. So they're kind of getting in their way. I don't think it's a device issue. I think there's a lot of other challenges that are taking place that they'll need to contend with.
Yeah, well, they never really figured out that HP plus Poly story either, right? Other than having headsets that automatically pair that one capability, there really hasn't been a lot of 1 + 1 = 3 from them. So it's just considering the share they had, it's going to be interesting to see what the next, their next act looks like, right? So
right. There was also a couple of interesting hardware partnerships. The one that I was going to touch base on was Jabra and Hudley, two people that might have been competitive in market have actually partnered together to come out with a larger room solution. It's really interesting because it's leveraging that video over IP modularity. Hudley was already kind of doing this with their Crew offering, and they also just came out with their C1. But now they're allowing the opportunity to take those Hudley L1 cameras that you can put on the side of the room and pair it with the Jabra Pentacast bar up front. It's a win for both of them. Jabra now has a viable large room solution that they can go to market with in combination with their Pentacast 40. So they have a small, medium, large portfolio. And Hudley, who's still focused on basically a camera space. They're not, although they're AI driven, very, very sharp cameras, they're not delivering any compute in the room. So they still need to find those partners that are going to help deliver either the Android operating system or the Windows operating system for those UC platforms. So it's a win for both. We'll see where it develops.
And I think the last one is Owl and Lenovo announced a partnership to bring Microsoft Teams rooms to market. So we see Owl a lot. It's been a very easy to buy, largely retail entrance into the marketplace. I can't tell you how many rooms I've walked in where there's an Owl sitting in the room, but that's not even their primary video conferencing vendor. They just thought it would be cool to have a couple. And it is a really elegant solution for front of room and more recently integrating with, center of table, more recently integrating with front of room. So having a Lenovo partnership to provide a Teams room controller and also to be able to take advantage of Lenovo's distribution channels, I think is again, using the term, a win-win for both companies.
Yeah, that increases Owl's Microsoft certified footprint, which is nice. Hey, look, Kieran, I'm going to take over your job. Zeus, there's one more to talk about. What's taking place on the front line of desk phones here?
Yeah, well, Mitel announced that they're moving manufacturing from China to the Gigaset factory in Germany, which makes some sense, right? They acquired that relationship when they bought Unify. Gigaset used to make the phones for Siemens Enterprise and then Unify. I talked to Mitel about it, and they said the cost, because you think manufacturing in China is cheaper, but by the time you go through shipping products back and forth across the world, you're not really saving any money. And so for them, they felt like they could bring the price point down. And between German engineering and Chinese engineering, I mean, there's no question which is better, right? So they're expecting to get better built devices at a price point that's equivalent, maybe a little lower, but certainly it allows them to be able to manage that supply chain a little bit better. And if there's something the last 5 years has taught us, is that there is so much uncertainty when you try and manage the supply chain where your devices are being built over in Asia with chip shortages and like political unrest and pandemics and things like that. This just gives them a lot more control. I don't think they want to get caught in a position where they can't get their hands on the devices again. And it's for all the chatter that we have about UC software, desktops and stuff, for frontline workers, which Mitel has a lot of them as customers, phones still matter, and they build as good a phone as anybody today.
Well, thanks both. I think, Craig, I know I'll have you deputise if I'm ever sick on holiday.
Craig's just gunning for everybody.
Well, before we do the outro, we'll do a quick roundup of events. We are approaching the home stretch of event season, but there's still a few interesting ones on the cards. We have a WildX event in a couple of weeks that's particularly interesting as they're trying to make their grand pitch of Beyond EMEA. And then in the week commencing the 17th, we have Contact Center Expo and, of course, the biggie, Microsoft Ignite. As ever, if you see one of the UC team or one of our exceptional analysts on the floor, please go and say hello. And that is a wrap for today's episode of the UC Big News Show. A massive thank you to Craig, Mel, Irwin, and Zeus for sharing their insights. If you found today's discussion valuable, please give us a like, share, and comment with your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Kieran Devlin, and you've been watching the UC Big News Show. Stay informed, stay ahead.